Good evening, everybody. It is wonderful to see you all. We're so happy you joined us for this special program focusing on cartooning for peace. My name is Stephanie Plunkett. I'm Deputy Director and Chief Curator here at the Norman Rockwell Museum. And my backdrop has already been commented upon. It's the beautiful Linwood House, which is an 1859 cottage on the museum's property. And we hope someday you can come to see it if you haven't already. We are so pleased that you're here because tonight we are actually going to explore the work of three exceptional cartoonists who use their passion for cartooning and social justice to inspire consideration of global issues and human rights through art. Panelists Liza Donnelly, Ann Telnaes, and Ed Hall are members of Cartooning for Peace, a group of international cartoonists working in support of world peace. And you will be hearing a lot about that tonight. The organization was envisioned in 2005 by French cartoonist Jean Plantu, United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, and others who believed in the communicative power of the cartoon medium. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to our panelists. Ann Telnaes is a gifted and prolific editorial cartoonist. In 2001, she became the second female cartoonist to win the Pulitzer Prize for Editorial Cartooning. In 2017, she received the Reuben Award and thus became the first woman to have received both the Reuben and the Pulitzer for Editorial Cartooning. Ann creates editorial cartoons in various media, animation, visual essays, live sketches, and traditional print for the Washington Post and other publications, as well as the Nib. Ed Hall is a three-time recipient of the Excellence in Journalism Award from the Florida Press Club. Code Red and Diversions are collections of his work, which is distributed through Artisans, a Canadian syndicate. His cartoons have been featured in Der Spiegel, the New Internationalist magazine, and in many international publications. Liza Donnelly is an award-winning editorial cartoonist and writer for The New Yorker magazine, The New York Times, Medium, CBS News, and CNN, among many others. She's the innovator of a form of visual journalism covering news and cultural events by digitally drawing them in real time. Liza travels the globe speaking about women's rights and free speech and has served as a cultural envoy for the U.S. State Department. She delivered a popular TED Talk that was translated into 38 languages and viewed over 1.4 million times, and she is the author of 17 books, both for children and adults. Liza's art is currently on view at the Norman Rockwell Museum in comic relief, and it will be on view through the end of September, so we're very excited about that. And we are so happy to have all of our panelists. I'm actually going to share my screen and let's see. Sorry. Let's see if you can all see that, and hopefully our artists as well. Okay, all right, great. So I thought it would be interesting to just share some core questions that we are going to be answering this afternoon, hopefully. And I'd like to also just mention that my colleagues, Rich Bradway and Mary Burley and Alyssa Stubel are working in the background because we would actually love to have your questions. And so you can actually just put them into the chat box, whether you're on the webinar or on YouTube, and we'll be thrilled to pose them, or you can pose them yourself to our panelists. So what we're hoping to think about today is what is cartooning for peace? What is the role of the cartoonist as a visual commentator? Why are images so potent, surpassing the written word in impact at times, as you know? And how far should the core democratic value of freedom of speech and expression go? Do any limitations apply? And I know artists have very distinctive opinions about that. So we're actually going to begin with what is cartooning for peace? And I'm wondering, Liza, if you might want to jump in and just talk a little bit about that.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
I see echo. I'm hearing myself. Well, North. Rich, anyway, apologies. I'm hearing myself. And
We can hear you, I think.
well, Cartooning for Peace, there, it's gone. Began in 2005 at the UN following the Danish cartoon controversy, which had happened right before that. And I think we're going to get into that later in this conversation. But Cartooning for Peace was started by, as you said, Jean Plantu. He's the primary cartoonist for Le Monde in Paris, and Kofi Annan, who was the Secretary General at the time. And the UN was having a week of conversations and panels on a subject called unlearning intolerance. Different people were coming to talk about how to unlearn intolerance. And since the Danish cartoon controversy had just happened, and also because Kofi Annan is a real fan of cartoons, he's no longer with us, he decided to have a day, dedicate a day to cartoons, editorial cartoons. And the UN sought out, I believe there's 12 of us, am I right, Ann? That to come speak about our craft on that one day in 2005. Yeah, my voice.
Yes, you sure can.
Go back to mute.
Anyway, there are cartoonists in this group from all over the world. We've got Gado from Kenya, Ann and myself, and Norio from Japan, and Michelle Kishka from Israel, and someone from Denmark, I forget his name at the moment. And we spoke about what cartooning means. And I think at that meeting, or around that time, is when Jean and Kofi Annan decided to form Cartooning for Peace, to create dialogue about the world and the importance of cartoons. It's not, I don't believe that Cartooning for Peace is really about drawing cartoons about peace. It's more about using cartoons as a way to have conversations about global issues. So, do you want me to read Kofi Annan part of this speech?
That would be wonderful, Liza. And we also have a clip from the original meeting, but if you would like to read a little bit first, that'd be great.
All right. It was a very powerful speech that day, and I think you can find it online. In fact, there's a Wikipedia page for Cartooning for Peace online, and there's also their website. If you want to learn more about Cartooning for Peace, you can go online. But I just pulled out part of his speech. I've always thought that cartoons are one of the most important elements in the press. They have a special role in forming public opinion because an image generally has a stronger, more direct impact on the brain than a sentence does, and because many more people will look at a cartoon than read an article. If you're flicking through a newspaper, you have to make a conscious decision to stop and read an article, but it is hardly possible to stop yourself from looking at a cartoon. That means that cartoonists have a big influence on the way different groups of people look at each other. They can encourage us to look critically at ourselves and increase our empathy for the sufferings and frustrations of others. But they can also do the opposite. They have, in short, a big responsibility. Cartoons make us laugh. Without them, our lives would be much sadder. But they are no laughing matter. They have the power to inform and also to offend. Short of physical pain, few things can hurt you more directly than a caricature of yourself, of a group you belong to, or perhaps worse, of a person you deeply respect. In other words, cartoons, in other words, can both express and encourage intolerance and also provoke it. And the sad truth is that they can also do all three. Cartoonists can help us to think more clearly about their work and how to react to it. So that was a portion of his speech that day.
That's really wonderful. And actually, we will address a little bit some of the cartoons that have provoked violence even, but let's take a look at the clip if we can.
should be in the Guinness Book of Records of closed newspapers.
And then turn towards the center. And we're going to make room in the center for the Secretary General, who should be arriving in a matter of, we don't know. Thank you.
We have to face the fact that sometimes there is tension, if not contradiction, between different values which in themselves are equally precious. In the present case, we find it between freedom of expression and respect for the beliefs and feelings of others.
Do I wake up each morning and approach that day's cartoon with the purpose of promoting peace? Well, no, not directly. But I do, as most of my colleagues do, try to put a spotlight on the inequalities and injustices in this world. Editorial cartoonists speak out for the ordinary person by holding our leaders accountable and exposing their hypocrisies and motives.
And that was a wonderful commentary too. Everybody probably saw both Liza and Ann in that clip. And what was it like to speak at the UN that day?
That was a long time. I think I'm getting some back feed again. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, it was in 2006, as Liza said, and I think I don't think I really realized where we're going to be speaking, and I think Liza and I were the only two people that actually had prepared talk, if I remember correctly, because everybody else, I don't think, cartoonists are not usually very organized. It was really an interesting time because it had happened right after the Danish cartoon controversy. And I know we're going to talk more about that, but it was a little different, I feel, conversation then than what we've been having lately, and that's because now we have social media playing such a large part, in our profession and affecting us as cartoonists so much. So it was definitely a different time, giving that talk, but I still feel the same way as what I said then. I really do feel that that's our role as cartoonists.
Sure, thank you.
Oh, I don't hear you very well.
Yeah, audio is a problem. Stephanie, don't hear you.
Sorry.
In that video, and we saw both Michelle Kishka and cartoonist from Palestine. What's his name? He passed away.
Oh, is it Baha?
Baha, yeah.
Yeah, he was wonderful. What a gentleman. What a wonderful cartoonist. There's some very interesting stories between him and Michelle Kitchka from Israel. They were very good friends, but they had to deal with the political realities of the time.
I can't imagine. I've talked to Michelle Kishka a lot about this, being a cartoonist in that region and having to draw about what's going on in the Middle East.
Yeah.
When you're so crowded in there with so many different viewpoints and threats, probably. So.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. It's funny you said that because I remember Michelle and Baha both telling me the story when there was an Israeli cartoonist conference in 2005, so right before this, and they were telling me that Baha, who only lived a very short distance from Jerusalem, I think he lived in Bethlehem, had to go through 4.5 hours of checkpoints just to attend the cartooning conference where they were talking about getting along.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Ed, can you say a little bit about this drawing? Is everybody able to hear okay?
Yeah, talk about the drawing.
Yep, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Well, it was done, in tribute to him when he passed away in 2018. He was always such, a gentle guy. It just seemed like he just emitted a kind of sense of, I don't know, just calm and, and I think I wanted to try and show him as a light, as a beacon for that. And as Ann said, I don't go into cartoons, think I'm going to draw about peace. But when the subject is a peaceful man, it's kind of hard not to do that.
So I think we'll continue to kind of look at some of the issues that have arisen through the publication of cartoons. And one of the significant cartoon controversies had to do with a Danish publication that published imagery based upon Mohammed. And I wonder if you, Liza or Ed or Ann, would like to comment upon what happened there and your thoughts about it. It was quite dramatic in 2005.
I'll just say something, then you guys can add to it. That what happened in Denmark, or Holland, sorry, was an editor decided to commission cartoonists or illustrators to draw Mohammed to see what kind of response he would get in the press from the drawings. And some decided to take the assignment and some didn't. And these are, I don't know if these are all of them, maybe they are, that we see on the screen, but there were some that were quite problematic for the Muslim community. And Ann mentioned that the internet was not a big thing, and it wasn't back then, but it was just beginning. And I think the internet combined with these imageries, these images of Muhammad, was a horrible mix. And I think the images were used to incite violence, and that's what happened. Am I stating this right, guys?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah. All I can remember is feeling. It was a very odd time because here in the States, we were, how do you draw about this when you can't really draw the subject? So there was really kind of a touchy kind of, you had to really be careful about how you approached it because we didn't want the same kind of problems here. We didn't want, to come off as seeming insensitive. And so it was a real challenge to come up with something. I don't know if you guys did any cartoons at the time on the subject. I think I might have done one.
Yeah, I did. It's there's a lot more to that story. I mean, we could spend a couple of hours just talking about it. But I mean,
there are books written on it too.
Yeah, and but as Liza said, I mean, yes, we did have the internet then. That's the reason it spread. But it also spread because those 12 cartoons were taken by a Muslim group to the Middle East, and also they added a few cartoons to it that were even worse than those. Because quite frankly, if you really look at those Danish cartoons, they're not that ridiculous. The one that caused the biggest stir was the one that you see with a bomb turban, because apparently that's supposed to be Muhammad. And there was a belief at the time, and still is, although some people will disagree with this, is that you cannot depict Muhammad in a form. But there's a lot of ancient art that has Muhammad in it, so that was part of the problem. And yes, we did have the internet that kind of blew that all up because everybody could see it. The problem in this country, in the United States, was frankly nobody printed these cartoons. I think there were 2 publications maybe that did, so nobody even knew what you were talking about. Yeah. But that didn't stop a lot of people, when they were discussing their opinion whether or not these cartoons should have been made. And that was a problem because I believe firmly you should be able to see what you're talking about if you're going to criticize it. So that was an eye-opening event for me as a cartoonist, because I saw, frankly, a lot of my colleagues who were very liberal who didn't think they should have been drawn. So it definitely opened up a discussion about cartoons and what the red line is, in cartooning.
Do you
Yeah,
all, do you all generally feel that, you know, as Kofi Annan was mentioning, that there are some values that are held so deeply that they should not be violated, or do you feel that everything is open for discussion in a way in cartoons?
Well, I think everything is open for discussion, but I think it has to, I believe it has to be carefully thought through. It's not as black and white as one would want it to be, you know? My take.
yeah. There's definitely a line. Some people's line is pushed a little further than others, but I mean, I think there are certain things that we, you don't, you kind of, you're careful with. Race is very important, very touchy. Religion, of course, here, and that, that's the whole Danish cartoon thing was, I think, centered around, they don't believe that Muslims don't believe that you should be able to depict the prophet, and they were pushing that line. The cartoonists were pushing that line, and some people said it was too much, and some people believe maybe it wasn't enough. And we're going to talk about this a little later, but you could say the same thing about Charlie Hebdo. They really had a history of pushing that line, and personally, as a cartoonist, I know where my line is. And I think everybody does, but you do have to be, like you said, Liza, you have to be cognizant of that.
I think I agree that there's no universal line. No, we should all have freedom of speech and freedom of draw, but every cartoonist is going to have their own line.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here is actually the office of the Paris satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo, which was attacked in 2015 by armed gunmen, and 12 people were actually killed. And that office had actually been bombed previously. This is an example of the kind of drawing that they might have published, this one by Stéphane Charbonnet.
And just a real quick thing, Stephanie, the reason that their offices were bombed before that was because they printed the Muhammad cartoons.
Yes. Yeah, so they actually reprinted what the Danish newspaper had printed. Yeah.
I've forgotten that.
Would anybody want to comment on Charlie Hebdo, the nature of the publication, and how you perceived what happened there?
Yeah, I can. I mean, from a personal standpoint, I mean, this happened in January of 2015, I believe. I was shocked because I heard about it early in the morning because we were over here in the States. I didn't know personally any of the cartoonists that were killed, but I knew of them, and I know that a lot of my colleagues knew them well as friends. It was an interesting time. This is I think you have to kind of talk about the Danish cartoons and Charlie Hebdo in the same conversation, in that, we'd already had the conversation about free speech and do we have lines, but we didn't have any deaths. And this time we had deaths. And so so initially, everybody, je suis Charlie, that was the rallying cry. Everyone was Charlie. But that changed. And then again, the conversation turned to, well, what should be allowed? I felt very strongly. I wrote a few pieces. I drew cartoons. I'm of the opinion that I don't think there should be red lines, which doesn't mean we don't self-edit. There is a difference. We are professionals. We know we have editors. They are supposed to also lead us the right way. And I just feel that if you feel so strongly about a point of view that a cartoon is making, that you can protest and you can write criticisms about it and you can boycott, but I don't see any justification for violence frankly, and killing. I don't get it. So that was kind of where I felt about that. I still feel very strongly about that. Charlie Hebdo, you know, it is a French publication, and I do feel that if you don't speak French, I think you're a little bit of a disadvantage. And if you do, you can look online about, you know, people that have written about the magazine and its history and satire in France. It's got its own history. So I don't think it's just as simple as, you know, saying that, oh my God, they drew something that offended someone. You know, I think you have to have a little bit more information than that. And that's just what I feel about printing these things. You know, I think you have to show the cartoon. You have to have a civilized discussion about it.
Thank you, Ann. I think that's an important point. So we know that cartoons can have tremendous power depending upon who's looking at them, certainly. But the editorial cartoonist has a very difficult job. And Ann, you put together a series of drawings that really speak to what an editorial cartoonist is and why they're significant and what some of the challenges are. And I wonder if you'd talk us through your series, which is really terrific.
Sure. Let me just real quickly say it was a online visual essay. So it was scrolling. It was vertical. It was for the Bertelsmann Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization, and at the time they were talking about democracy. And I decided to do a cartoon because I was a cartoonist, you know, to show them, you know, what we're all about. So I'll just go ahead and read it in case people don't see it very well. It says,
That's great.
People don't usually associate editorial cartoonists as an essential element of a democracy. They think of cartoonists as the people who draw the funny pages or stand-up comedians.
Take my wife, please.
Yeah. But editorial cartoonists are more than just funny guys. They are a vital part of any democracy. It's a little bit out of focus for me to read.
Our primary purpose is to express a point of view.
Yeah,
right?
Well, humor is an important part of what we do. Our primary purpose is to express a point of view, right?
Okay, now I see it. Thank you. I must have had a bad connection. Our aim is pointed toward those who abuse their power. And through satire and ridicule, editorial cartoonists expose corruption and wrongdoing by our representatives and institutions. But cartoonists face dangers throughout the world. We are threatened, jailed, beaten, and even killed. So why are cartoons so powerful? Because they are visual. You don't have to read to understand them. Cartoons transcend language and borders. Everyone. Oops. I'm sorry. I'm getting it fuzzy again.
That's okay. It's everyone from the richest to the poorest, and regardless of class, can relate to and be affected by an editorial cartoon.
While cartoonists in the US don't have to fear being arrested or jailed for what we draw, like some of our colleagues do around the world, we do face threats. Social media mobs, politically motivated terminations, and of course, a president who likes to throw around libel law action. So if you see a country without editorial cartoonists, or one where they're not creating tough, pointed satire against politicians and policies, be aware. A silenced cartoonist is an indicator of an unhealthy environment for freedom of expression. Editorial cartoonists are democracy's canary in a coal mine.
What a wonderful series, Ann. Did you write that first and then think about how to come up with drawings that would express each thought?
I wish I was that organized. No, I just do sketches and I start piecing things together. I'm not a very linear type creator.
Well, it's a wonderful piece and a really important
great.
explanation on the importance of cartoons. I don't know if anybody else has a thought about some of what Ann expressed here.
Yeah, no, I've seen that before, Ann. It's really great. It's like
Oh, thanks.
puts it all in there to get, puts it all in one piece, and I love it. It's very useful and well done. And I think most of us work that way. We're not linear people. That's why we're cartoonists. We're like, an idea comes with a visual, and then you sort of mix it up and it changes. So yeah.
And Ann, we have some other wonderful drawings by you here. So I wonder if you might talk a little bit about some of these. They're really terrific.
Okay, so this is the one that we were just talking about, the Danish cartoons, about drawing a red line. This is one of the cartoons I created during that time period. That's the term I kept hearing, where's the line? Where's the red line for us, and people would discuss where the red line was. So I just thought, well, since I am not a believer in red lines that other people are telling other people, because it's sort of, I guess my argument is, who are we going to give that responsibility to? Are we going to give it to the government? Are we going to give it to a church, a religious organization? Who's going to decide that? So what I drew here were the three major religions representatives, as well as, like a generic politician or, an institution. And each one of them has a line. And that puts us right in that little box.
Yeah. And can I jump in here real fast? When I said line, it's more of a self-editing thing, not putting anything in that you would want to offend someone with. I mean, at times you do want to be offensive, but there's other times where there's things that you just cannot say or do or draw. I mean,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I meant. I just wanted to clarify that. I wasn't saying, I also agree with you. There should not be any red lines per se, but you do have to self-edit.
Yes, absolutely. And we're all professionals. That's what we do, and Ed's right. I mean, and, everybody has their, I'm not a bomb thrower as a cartoonist. I don't draw a cartoon just to go rise out of it.
Yes, you are.
Well, anyway, some people love doing that all the time. But I have certain topics that I do want to be strong on. So anyway, but this is just another cartoon talking about, how a lot of people think they're for free speech until they're offended themselves.
I love that cartoon.
Yeah.
Thank you. And of course, I think the majority of my cartoons the last 3 years have been Trump. So these other ones you're seeing are quite old. But Trump is, of course, he's doesn't seem to understand what a free press is or what role it is in the society, especially ours. And so I've done a lot of cartoons about him going after, what he calls the fake news.
I love that the lights look like pinatas. This is a great animation. You do a lot of animated cartoons too.
I do animated GIFs. Yeah, this is, this, of course, this is not about, either one of those controversy, but I was really happy with this cartoon because if you might remember, I believe it was 2016. Yeah, the burkini incident, where in France, there were a number of cities that banned the burkini, which if you don't know what that is, that's, a swimsuit that covers a lot more. It is a Muslim garb, but a lot of women use it for various reasons, protection from the sun, just being more modest, not wanting to wear a bikini. And all the talk that I heard about at that time, I was like, I'm getting tired of why is it always guys that are talking about this and deciding what women have to wear. So I thought I'd love to do a GIF that showed this. So I got, one side pulling it off. The woman has no say in it. And then the other side pulling it down. So it turns into a complete covering. And, I love the response I got to this because I did this while I was with the Post. And they put it on their website. It got 1 million hits. And the reason was because it went all over, the beauty of the internet. And what I loved about it is I got responses from women from both sides, the ones that believed in covering themselves and the ones that didn't. And they were all positive. And I thought that is exactly what I wanted to do in that cartoon, you know?
That's exciting. That's what the power of art. Amazing. And here's another great gift.
So this is a cartoonist that, as you know, Cartooning for Peace will highlight certain cartoonists that are either imprisoned or in trouble, being threatened. This was a Iranian cartoonist that was at a camp in Papua New Guinea by the Australian government. He didn't start out as a cartoonist, but while he was there, he was doing a wonderful series of cartoons that showed the conditions within the camp. And his name was Ali Dorani, by the way, but he went by Eaten Fish. That's what's on his cartoons. And it was very sad because he was suffering quite a bit. He had some health problems, some other problems, and anyway, a lot of cartoonists did cartoons. That's what we do when there's a cartoonist in trouble. We'll do cartoons to show that to get some airtime, out there, so people are aware of this fact. And a lot of the cartoonists from around the world did it, especially the Australian cartoonists were very supportive in speaking out against their own government about what they were doing there. So this was my little gift that I did for him. And happy to say he is now out, and he has been relocated to Norway, and I understand he's doing well.
That's great. I want to add, Ann, that and Stephanie, and Ed, that Cartooning for Peace does that every 2 years. They'll highlight a cartoonist that's in trouble or needs help, and give them an award, a big event in Geneva, which is where the foundation is. And when Kofi Annan was live, he was there, so that there was press about this cartoonist, official press, and also give him some money and some support, financial support. And there's another organization that does the same thing, Cartoonist Rights Network. And it's a really nice, it's not the right word, but a supportive community among cartoonists globally. And
they work together too. Cartooning for Peace has worked together with Cartooning, CRNI, Cartooning Rights Network International, as well as the cartoon movement. They've all banded together to highlight these cartoonists in trouble.
Yeah, and I wanted to say that one of the reasons I was so excited to be included with Cartooning for Peace is it's such a diverse group of cartoonists. I mean, people I would have never seen, like Eaten Fish. I would have never seen his work, and so it's one of the benefits of being in this group. It's just great.
And a lot of
cartoonists. Questions from our audience, which they are going to pose to you themselves. So I'd like to invite Gail to ask her question.
Hi, this is Erin. Thank you so much for hosting us today, Stephanie, and thank you for being here, Liza, Ed, and Ann. My question is, I'd like to revisit the line on what your line is. When you submit a cartoon to your editor and they either reject it or want to modify it, what is your personal line? When do you push back and when do you give in? Especially when you so deeply believe in something, where do you take a stand with your own cartoons? Thank you.
Great question.
Who do you want?
Who would like to start? Actually, I'm sure you might all have something to say about that.
Why don't you start? Because I don't really have the same situation as you guys do. Go ahead.
Well, I don't either. I mean, I think Ann is the one with the editor. I have my local editor, but my nationally syndicated cartoons, I'm pretty much on my own. I use my wife as my first editor, I like to say. If I can get it by her without a wince, then it's probably going to fly. But Ann, you want to speak about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was sort of in Ed's position for the majority of my career because I was just freelance syndicated, and I wasn't edited except a syndicate. I guess you're being edited if the editor doesn't use your cartoon, right? But I do have an editor now. And, it's a very interesting question. I have noticed that just because of the tenor of the times now, I used to never get cartoons killed. I have had a few killed. And, the editor, first of all, that is the editor's job. I mean, they are trying to save yourself. They're trying to save you from yourself. And I can attest to that. I know I'm being saved. But, you do have to, I have thought about that. I've thought about, where would I take a stand? And thankfully, I haven't gotten to that point. These cartoons that were killed, I understood at the time why they couldn't be done. But I think that's something you have to think about as a cartoonist. You do have to think about that if you're being edited for not a good reason, and the edit is really not the word, it's more like censored, then you have to decide, what do you stand as a cartoonist? How do you stand? And I do have that. I do have a line in that.
Yeah.
But I do have a good editor. So yeah, it's frustrating though. It is frustrating because you want to do these things because you get riled up and you think you got
Right.
a really good cartoon, but that's the editor's job.
It is, and I have to say, I do a lot of local cartoons for a weekly paper, and I get edited because I'm more center left, I think, and my editor is definitely center right. So I do get some pushback occasionally. I got a little pushback actually this week on a local cartoon, which was kind of odd, but I think it all comes down to your passion for what you're doing and also your relationship with your editor. I mean, I think it's really important to build a relationship with an editor, and there's a trust both ways, right, Ann? When you say, yeah. That's really important, and it's a communication. Like she said, he's trying to save your ass, and he or she can sometimes be the best judge of whether that's going to fly at that particular time. And it's taken me a long time to be able to accept that kind of criticism. I used to push back hard on it before, but now I realize, and again, even coming from my wife, I'm able to accept it. She's usually pretty spot on. My wife's pretty sharp.
Good to have a good editor, no matter where they come from. We have another question from Gail. And Gail, I wonder if you'd like to answer your question. Erin, thank you for that great question.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to read it because it's a very emotional question for me. But I have to tell you that I am a very big political cartoon fan. And I am drawn to them. And in general, I love them all. However, in Hitler's Germany, many cartoons appeared depicting Jews in the worst possible light, stealing from the poor, raping the globe, and Jews were always depicted with the most anti-Semitic features, large noses, beards, etc. They had some fabulous Nazi cartoonists, I have to say. What effect, if any, might these cartoons have helped to rally Germans against the Jews and support of Hitler? And I want to tell you, if you want to see any of these cartoons, I have seen them in Jewish museums. Usually they're in private rooms because they are so offensive, and you kind of have to know what you're getting into when you go to look at them. So that is my question, I guess, the other side of political cartooning.
Thank you so much. That's a very powerful question. And Liza, I know you're a great historian of the field. I wonder if you'd like to say a few words.
Oh, wow. Well, yes, I'm aware of those cartoons. I don't know if I've ever seen them, but I knew they existed. And yes, I'm sure they rallied Hitler's followers in a huge way. And if you look at history, you'll see other groups in other parts of the world, in our country, that were not quite so clearly rallied by cartoons, but the status quo was maintained by cartoons, like racist cartoons. Even in the New Yorker, in the early days of the New Yorker, there were racist cartoons, there were sexist cartoons. So cartoons have been used for negative purposes like that. And also during the suffrage movement, if you look at the suffrage cartoons in the early part of the last century, there were cartoonists drawing pro-suffrage cartoons and anti-suffrage cartoons. And there were anti-suffrage cartoons were drawing cartoons that were really negative about women. The way they dressed, they'd make women look like men, very manly, which was a bad thing back then, and using visual stereotypes to rally people to their cause. So And that, that's, I think that speaks to the red line issue as well. So that's, each cartoonist has to realize where their line is, and you have to think about cultural issues and political issues that are, you may have thought 20 years ago were okay, but that are clearly not okay anymore. So, and I don't think that's politically correct. It's just thinking about other human beings. So that's
yeah. I'd also like to mention that there was a if the caller's not in doesn't know about this, there was a Jewish cartoonist named Arthur Cizik. I saw an incredible show of his work at the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. Last name is spelled S-Z-Y-K. And he was doing stuff that it really endangered his life during Hitler's time. He was doing anti-Hitler cartoons. He was showing all of Hitler's lackeys as, dressed in just crazy clothes. And, he was pushing back. And, in terms of the anti-Semitic cartoons, those were all just part of the Goebbels, propaganda machine. And they understood the power of cartoons for bad. I mean, and so, that's, but if you want to see something that tempers that from history, look up Arthur Cizik's cartoons. I think you'll really like them a lot.
Ed, I think that's a great point. Arthur Szyk and also Boris Artzabashev was another one who was really countering these totalitarian regimes.
I just want to also mention, well, first of all, I have seen those cartoons. I can see why the caller was so emotional about them. As Liza said, we've had that throughout the history of editorial cartooning. Depending on, you have to take into context on when these things were drawn. I mean, if you look at some of the cartoons done at the turn of the 20th century, the Irish and the German didn't get off very easily either, the ones that came to the United States. Caricature, unfortunately, that is an inherent problem with caricature, because we do make features, different and bigger and smaller or whatever, according to what we're trying to say. But like Liza was saying, you have to understand what the situation is, what cartoon you're doing, and what is the message you're trying to put across. We deal with visual metaphors. The problem is sometimes that people don't understand the language either. And maybe, when we talk more about social media and the internet and how that also can change our cartoons to maybe mean something else, that's a problem too. Just to get away a little bit from the caricature thing, we have that problem now in misreading cartoons too. We had a situation with the New York Times where a cartoonist used a Jewish star to depict the Israeli state. There's some very simple things that we as cartoonists have to do to not have that misunderstanding that we're doing anti-Semitic cartoons. And that if you're going to criticize the Israeli state for their policies, that is fair game, draw the flag, don't draw a Jewish symbol. There's these simple things to do to not create that problem. But caricature is a problem. It's a minefield for us.
Thanks.
That's that self-editing thing I was talking about.
Great questions and wonderful response.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks.
And Ed, I wonder if you could take us through some of your wonderful cartoons. When did you actually join Cartooning for Peace, and when did that happen?
I was thinking back. It had to be around 2010, but they used stuff from prior. I mean, I was sending them stuff prior to that, so it might have been earlier than that. I can't really recall, but I've been with them for a while. But this cartoon was when we, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were really the first wars where the media was really embedded in with the soldiers. I mean, it was a little bit in Vietnam. We all remember pictures of the, people, rolling around in Vietnam in the rice fields with some of the soldiers. But in Afghanistan and Iraq, it seemed like we were media was really almost a part of the war. And we were seeing war in a different way than we'd ever seen it, up close and personal. So that's kind of what this cartoon was about.
Thank you. Yeah, it's It's really wonderful with the
Great.
soldier there with the microphone sticking out at the end of the gun.
This cartoon was for the anniversary of the when Auschwitz was liberation of Auschwitz. This cartoon actually went viral on the internet. Was shown on France 24 TV. The Cartooning for Peace. They held it up and showed it. But I don't know. It's one of those simple cartoons that comes to you kind of in a dream. I kind of woke up with this idea. And I know I wanted to take that sign that said "Work will make you free" and change it to "Never again." So that's kind of what I did here. This one pretty much speaks for itself.
That's great.
That's great.
Thank you. The one on the left also ran with Cartooning for Peace. They actually printed this one really large and had it hanging in a museum somewhere in Paris. I'm not exactly sure where, but again, you know, overabundance of weapons in the world is causing a lot of our, you know, problems. And, you know, I just wanted to show, it was a Christmas time cartoon. I just really wanted to show him dumping those into the ocean. And the other one was May, when she wanted to hold the general election. It turned out to be backfire for her. So just a real, you know, it's pretty much straightforward cartoon. But I mean, I like drawing her. She's got a lot of interesting features.
What makes somebody interesting to draw, would you say?
Well, it's like Ann said, we like to exaggerate, you know, so her hair is really big. She's got big hair, so I wanted to draw her hair big. She's got the Hillary Clinton pantsuit she always wore, so I wanted to show that as well. But it's exaggeration of features. It's finding a feature that is kind of, you know, indicative of that person and kind of pushing it.
Right.
That's why Joe Biden is hard to draw, because he doesn't.
He is hard. He's very hard to draw. This cartoon is actually on Cartooning for Peace's latest volume of cartoons. I was really honored they picked this one to put on the cover. So again, pretty much straightforward. Now, this is when the Yellow Vests were rioting in France. I took Delacroix's famous painting and basically put yellow vests on everybody. And, you know, Russia pushing the limits of their borders.
It seems like cartoons can really swing from being extremely serious, very poignant, like something like this, to obviously much more lighthearted. Do you just internally understand the right tone for a subject that you are approaching generally? Or do you try a few different solutions?
Yeah. I mean, I'll do rough sometimes. Sometimes ideas wake me up. Sometimes it's immediate. And sometimes it's, you know, Ann and Liza can attest to this. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth. But, you know, the good ones are the ones for me that come fast. And this was a fast one. This is just enough. I mean, this is enough killing, enough terror. So that's kind of where this one came from.
So Judy would love to know, Ed, where are you mainly publishing your work so that we can all make sure we look for it?
Well, you can see my work on artisans.com. That's my syndicate. You can also see my work on halltoons.com. And all my social media is under Halltoons, like cartoons, but Halltoons, HALLTOONS. So if you go to Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, I'm under Halltoons.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. Beautiful work, Ed.
Thank you.
Liza, do you want to talk a little bit about your involvement with Cartooning for Peace and some of the work here?
I've been with them since 2005 or 6. I guess it was 6, wasn't it, when they had the UN event. Honored to be invited to participate in that day. This cartoon I did immediately after the Charlie Hebdo murders. It was a very emotional day for all of us. I think Ann spoke about it earlier. We woke up in the morning and faced what had happened and spent the rest of the day communicating with other cartoonists around the globe, sharing drawings, I think, and grief, and it was coming together. So I did this cartoon. This is one that I did early on in my time with them, and the Cartooning Piece uses it a lot in some of their books. That's what they do. Sometimes they'll not commission, but they'll ask, they'll put a call out for cartoons on a certain subject, like, well, piece, or actually women. There was a show of women's work and a book about that. They'll have panel discussions around different parts of the world, and they'll want to have an exhibit of cartoons. So this one is in a New Yorker kind of format, which I do sometimes for Cartooning Piece.
And that's Mommy, Can We Watch the Peace channel?
Yeah, no, I forget what war that was for. Probably during the Iraq War. I was like, this was, yeah.
It definitely speaks to that inundation of news that we feel is.
Yeah, like you do a lot of cartoons with the mother-daughter. I love that. I love that.
It turns out that I do, and it's not a conscious thing. I like putting words into children's mouths. Kind of brings it down to the reality.
I love it. I love it.
Another one that I did for them that they've used frequently, just talking about teaching piece or discussing piece, and how everybody has a different interpretation of what piece is or what it could be. So that's what that cartoon says. And over my time with Cartooning for Peace, I mean, I'm a New Yorker cartoonist, but I also do political cartoons, and I've done political cartoons for them since 1984. New Yorker style political cartoons, which are very different than what Ann and Ed do. But many of my early cartoons for them were without words. So I'm familiar with that type of thinking, is wordless imagery and messages without words. But with getting to know more international cartoonists, I just have loved being a student of their work and how they use visual metaphors so beautifully and so powerfully. Angel Bulagan comes to mind. He's a cartoonist. He's originally from Cuba. He lives in Mexico now. He doesn't speak English, but if you look him up, his work is amazing, and many others. He's just one. But I've learned how to do that a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, it never hurts to broaden your, point of view and other artists that you look at. I've really found some really, like Bulligan is great. I mean, I've found some really interesting cartoonists through cartooning.
And he uses visual metaphors quite differently than many of us.
So we have a great question from YouTube as well right now. And speaking of political cartooning, I know that obviously the questioner says, in addition to cartoonist, would you describe yourselves as news junkies?
News junkies?
News junkies, yeah.
We have to be, kind of. I mean, I enjoy it. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I mean, editorial cartoonists are journalists. I know that a lot of people don't think so, but we actually are. Not that a lot of editors think we are, but some do. But we are considered journalists. That's the difference between an editorial cartoonist and a regular cartoonist. Is we're supposed to have a point of view. We're visual commentators, and instead of using words, we use pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would suggest that if the caller is interested in becoming a cartoonist, or anybody out there that's listening, that don't just get your news from one source. For God's sake, go overseas. Look at websites from Asia and the Middle East, and broaden your view of the world. Don't just watch Fox News all day, and don't just watch CNN all day.
That's right.
Yeah, you have to have, if you're going to do this job, you have to wake up every morning being excited and interested to find out what's going on, because it is a grind. I mean, I love it, but you really do have to, get up every morning and be enthusiastic to read as much as you can and listen to the news as much as you can. As Ed said, you want to get both sides. It's not that you have to depict both sides in a cartoon, because that's not what an editorial cartoon is. It's supposed to be your point of view, but just to broaden your knowledge.
And Liza, I know that your live drawing is based directly often on what is happening that particular day.
Yeah, that's it's something I've started doing since the pandemic because I'm here stuck in my studio, which is not a bad thing. And I've been doing the live drawing before the pandemic. I was going and covering news events with my iPad, but now when I'm here, I decided that every day at 5 to pick a subject in the news, whether it's about the pandemic or Black Lives Matter marches or I'll pick something in the news that I want to draw about, and I will draw it freehand. I'll sometimes do a sketch beforehand, but most of the time just put my phone in a device over my hand and then just draw it and talk to my followers as I'm drawing it. And sometimes it's conversational about like how I'm feeling about it, how we're coping as a country, what I think is happening with this, or what I don't understand about that. So it's interesting. It's like a new direction for me. This one I did when Trump was first president and he was attacking the press repeatedly, and I was furious, so did this.
And this is a simple Statue of Liberty, which comes up a number of times in various scenarios for you, it seems.
I use her a lot. For me, she represents our country in a succinct way. Like, remember Uncle Sam? How Uncle Sam was used in cartoons in another century, but I don't think we see him anymore. So I use Statue of Liberty, which represents what I think the good parts of our country are.
Mm-hmm.
I still draw Uncle Sam.
Do you? Oh, cool.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'll have to look for those. This is an example of trying to broaden, draw about. I've mostly been America-based for most of my career, except for the last 10 years or so. And when Trump was running and Marine Le Pen was running as well in France, they were using the same tactics to rally their base, which is fear. And that peur is a French word for fear. So I was just making a comparison between the two.
Now I wish I could put my Le Pen cartoon in there.
What did you draw, Ed?
I had her in a pig pen and it said Le Pig Pen.
Thank you. So here's another question from our audience, from Shirley on YouTube. Would you say that Mad Magazine includes editorial cartooning, or is that another kind of cartooning?
I grew up with Mad Magazine. I think it's more of an influence than strictly editorial cartooning. I mean, I think it influenced me heavily reading those Mad magazines as a kid, but I don't know. They occasionally touch on political stuff, but not a lot, right, Ann?
I didn't grow up with Mad Magazine. I mean, I think, I do think a lot of cartoonists, not just editorial cartoonists, but cartoonists in general, who are generally male, were influenced by Mad Magazine. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I was influenced by Mad, and I also, you might be interested to call.
And you can really tell in your drawings, Liza.
No, but I just loved it, and I think there's a book coming out soon. I don't know when, but about Mad Magazine. A lot of academics writing about Mad, and I got to see an advanced copy. And one of the things they said in the book, which I thought was fascinating, was that Mad Magazine, although it didn't really have overtly political cartoons, it sort of instructed those of us of the ripe age to be subversive, in a way, to look at our culture differently, to look at our culture from a suspicious way. And I think that's what Mad did for a lot of us editorial cartoonists.
That makes perfect sense. Definitely had that point of view. Liza, do you want to comment on this very powerful work?
Thank you. This was done when we discovered that our government was detaining children.
They're still doing it.
They're still doing it, yeah, right. I'm sorry. But when we found that out, that's what I drew this. And this is digital. I draw digitally now part of the time, and this is done on my iPad. And I share these things on, like, the New Yorker would not buy something like that. I don't even show it to them because it's not something that they would buy. This one also. When I read an article about how women immigrants had to often use their bodies to get what they wanted, to get freedom. I drew this cartoon, and most of these political cartoons that I do are on Medium, which is a blog platform. The New Yorker, they have political cartoons, but they haven't recently bought any of mine for their website like this.
So it seems that various publications, whether digital or in print, have very particular points of view that you just probably know internally. Would that
Yeah.
be the case?
And there aren't that many markets right now either. So it's tough. I know that I don't have a syndicate, so I don't really know what that's like, but I utilize the internet and try to get my work out that way.
You do a lot of cartoons that focus on feminism and women's rights. And,
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of always have. In the last 10 years or so, I started to think about how, and I'm, you know, being a New Yorker cartoonist for the first half of my career, and I still am, but I usually just focus on America. I focused on being a woman or person in America because that's what I know. And I think over time, with my involvement with the cartooning piece and being much more knowledgeable from the internet, reading online, I began to think like, well, there must be a way I can draw about women in other countries. And what I discovered as I thought about it was that women around the globe have a lot in common, even though we may look different, we may wear different clothes. I mean, and women are diverse. We're very diverse. We're not all one monolith. We may have all breasts and vaginas, but we're not all nurturing. We're not all sweet. We're not all soft. We don't all like to cook. But we all, and see, I can't read this either. We're harassed, belittled. What does it say?
Assaulted, dismissed, raped, underpaid.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. On one level or another in every country, women have to deal with this kind of thing. So that's where I did a series of cartoons about this. And it's vertical because this was published in the Nib. And then, of course, this is right after in the beginning of the Me Too movement with Harvey Weinstein. When that hit the news, I knew, of course, this is not just Hollywood, it's global. So that's what this drawing is trying to depict.
And I was so interested to see that you had actually created a cartoon based upon the Four Freedoms.
I didn't know you were going to put this in. I think I did this. You guys have an exhibit that's traveling right now, and it's in France at the moment. I saw it.
It was in France, which was wonderful. Actually, for the 75th anniversary of D-Day, an exhibition focusing on the concept of the Four Freedoms as enduring ideals, or hopefully enduring ideals. But it's now at the Denver Art Museum, and will come back to us in September. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, Norman Rockwell, you can speak about this. Norman Rockwell did 4 paintings that were used. Can you speak about it, Stephanie?
Oh, well, sure. So Rockwell did 4 famous paintings, now famous paintings, in 1943 that were inspired by Franklin D. Roosevelt's 1941 address to Congress that, very boldly stated that there were these 4 freedoms that everyone, not just in the United States, but in the world should have. And they were, of course, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And they really helped to help the American public understand what they were fighting for, essentially, during World War II. But I'd love to hear, your thoughts about this and what inspired you to take on the 4 freedoms.
I don't quite remember what the context was. I think there was something you were when you were beginning to curate this exhibit of his work. I was contacted by the museum to be involved somehow. I don't really remember.
And Liza was one of our advisors. We had a really helpful panel of advisors from various fields of expertise.
That's right.
And Liza was a great help to us during that time.
Thank you.
So
I
not mine.
I've discovered that Norman Rockwell, I mean, he's somebody that I knew about all my whole life. I'm sure Ed and Ann are the same. But I didn't really understand his social justice activism in his paintings until more recently. And very much, I mean, he's a painter, but he's in some ways he's a cartoonist, like he's illustrating our culture and illustrating our life.
Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing our slides and so you can see everybody a little bit bigger. It's really very moving and exciting to see the work that you've been doing all these years. And I wonder if you could talk about what's exciting for you now. What are you working on now? Would each of you want to comment on that a little bit? Anne, how about you?
I'm exhausted. How's that?
You've been teaching.
I mean, I as was mentioned, I work for the Washington Post. So, you know, all I've been doing, it seems like, is Trump cartoons for the past 3 years. And I, you know, I do that on purpose because I think it's a very dangerous time. So yeah, so you know, I've described this before as I feel like all I'm doing is I'm drawing as fast as I can, you know, as frantically as I can. It's hard to remember this now, but, you know, I've been in this business for almost 30 years. And, you know, there used to be downtime, you know, in the summer, news might, you know, slack off a little bit. I mean, even during the work week when Congress was in session, you maybe had one big story a week. And now it's not only daily, it's hourly, you know, and it's something that you have to think about when you're drawing, because I'm certainly not without ideas, but I try to edit what I'm doing to have the most, you know, creative punch, because I don't want to spin my wheels on, you know, Trump writing kafofo on one of the tweets or something. You know, I want to hit the issues that maybe people aren't necessarily hearing about, you know, like the EPA going completely by the wayside, you know, that sort of thing. So that's completely different. And of course, you know, we really haven't talked much about social media, but you know, social media has really changed the landscape for editorial cartoonists. I mean, it's been good. I mean, you know, I started out as a freelancer. You know, the internet is great for us. We can reach so many more people. And if you're not on a paper, which I wasn't at the time with the Post, you know, that's the way you reach your audience. And social media is a great way to interact with people. And I love the response I get from people on social media now, because, you know, they're energized too, and they want to get involved with the political process, and they want to speak their mind. But it also kind of opens up all kinds of stuff. You know, we're used to criticism. You know, we're cartoonists. We don't have very thin skins. But, you know, we know what social media can do. And unfortunately, it can also take our cartoons, and people can manipulate them, and they can change the narrative of your cartoon and create absolute hell for you. You know, and that's something Cartooning for Peace actually talked about at their last big meeting in Strasbourg in 2019. You know, we talked about the impact of social media on, you know, especially the women creators, because, you know, we get the misogynistic crap thrown at us. And, you know, we're still figuring out how to deal with it. I mean, the way I deal with it now is completely different than how I dealt with it before. So it's a learning process, but it's part of the job.
I mean, I'm sure on the one hand, it's wonderful to have so much public reaction, but on the other hand, really challenging when, you know, your work is either misconstrued or, you know, just criticized harshly because of a particular point of view. How do you handle that now, Anne?
Oh, now, you know what, I speak out. I mean, if somebody tweets some obnoxious thing at me or, you know, trolls me, I will just take a screenshot of that tweet, and then I'll let my followers go after that person. So it's actually a great way of doing it. But, you know, when it first happened to me, I went silent, and that is a difficult thing to do, because when you go silent, you have people, you know, they like I said, they change the narrative of what you're trying to say, and people can be destroyed, you know, when that happens. So I think as cartoonists, I want to make sure that when a cartoonist is being attacked for something in his cartoon that isn't true, that you speak out and say it. You say, you're not reading that right. You're putting your own biases on that. So yeah, it's something we all have to be aware of for each other as well.
For sure. That's a great response, Ann. Thank you. We do have a question from the audience from Rich, and I think he is going to ask that question himself.
Hi there. Knowing that you have many peers that you are connecting with Cartoonists for Peace, what are the differences that you're experiencing between the American and non-American cartoons and the cartoon culture, and how those cartoonists are, dealing with the current events of today? And you've touched upon it a little bit, but I just wonder if you could elaborate.
Well, one thing I find fascinating about being a part of that group is you do get to see different perspectives about the globe from another part of the globe. You're not just seeing an American perspective. You're seeing what other countries, the cartoonist in another country is reflecting what his people feel about America, or what those citizens feel about bigger issues. So, and you also get to see what that cartoonist is drawing about in their particular country. Gado in Kenya, I don't know much about his country, and so I can see what's going on by looking at his cartoons, and it's fascinating. And that's the upside of that for me.
Thank you for that great question, Rich. Anybody else want to comment on it, or?
Well, I just wanted to say one thing about our colleagues is, in terms of different cartoonists around the world have different limitations because of the countries they live in, especially women cartoonists. They have to be careful. But I mean, I am so encouraged by my colleagues overseas because they're so creative about going around these things. Like certain countries, they can't draw the actual politicians. So they'll use an animal or something to represent it. Now, they have gotten in trouble for those things, but that is the one thing that cartoonists have to do. They have to be aware, and talking about Ed's point about, you have to know what your line is. They know what their line is, unless, so they can keep working, but they work around it. They're still making commentary, but they just have to work with their limitations. And I think that goes to what Liza was saying too about, our overseas colleagues, they depend more on visual imagery. They don't depend so much on words, right? And they do some beautiful artwork, but they're very powerful too, because they don't have any words in them, and you have to kind of think when you're looking at them. So I've always been a big admirer of that approach to cartooning, is doing more visually expressive ones.
Yeah, I had an editor once that told me to take the number of words you've got, cut it in half, and then cut it in half again. And that's,
wow, an editor said that? Usually editors want more words.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of my cartoons, I try to live by that too. I mean, I think the best cartoons are the ones that have fewer words. I really strongly believe that. And again, the European cartoonists, you see it. I mean, and it might be a history of art. It might be something to do with that. It might be, you go back to Damier, so, it's really powerful stuff. And Stephanie, you were asking earlier what, the kinds of things we're working on. I actually came at editorial cartooning from the fine art side. I didn't come at it from the political science side. I started as a fine artist and kind of, caught up politically, so to speak, as I developed my career. So I think people come at this from all different facets of life, and that's what's fascinating about it. And one of the interesting things, and different personalities, and it's just a great profession to be in. I love all my colleagues.
Yeah.
Sounds like a very exciting field. very, very constantly changing and always something to contribute. Liza, do you want to say anything about what you're working on right now, what you're excited about?
This visual live drawing I'm very excited about. It's really interesting to do. It's like a new way to do an editorial cartoon, and I'm trying to figure it out. One thing specifically I'm working on that's not about editorial cartoons per se, but I wrote a book 10 years ago about women cartoonists at the New Yorker magazine, and there were some since 1925. And I just signed the contract to do a sequel to that, so that's exciting because it'll come out next year. And what's great about that is that, and the reason why I wanted to do a sequel is because there's a lot more women cartoonists drawing now. Is the New Yorker has exploded with creators who are women, and they're going after subjects that that we couldn't do before. So it's great.
Well, I can't tell you what a great honor and a pleasure it's been to talk to all of you and to thank you for the exceptional work that you are doing, which really lights up people's lives. And I really believe that your audiences feel that they know you through your cartoons and really have a personal connection. So we appreciate the outstanding work you're doing. And I'd also like to thank our audience for joining us tonight. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Liza's exhibition will be on view through September 27th. We hope to see you if you can make it. And we'll have another wonderful program at 5:30 next Tuesday, focusing on the art of cartooning. So thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful evening. Thanks to our wonderful cartoonists, Liza, Ed, and Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Ann. Thank you, Ann.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.